got me like
Yeah.
one of this.
Are we going to do do you reckon 1 dot point at a time?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think so. Maybe like an one. Okay.
Like do the
I'll write
first
it
dot
down.
point. You know what I mean?
Have you started?
Yeah.
Have you started?
No.
Perfect.
Yes.
Right.
Do you reckon we go around the circle, give our 1 dot point, and then consensus for the dot point,
Yes.
and then move on?
Yeah, and
Yes.
then we can do an overall of the.
Yeah, and then an
So, like,
overall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So each dot point, say what you
Gave it.
and like your little piece of evidence, why?
Little bit of why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like keep it one sentence and then make sure everyone speaks first before we
Yeah.
Yeah.
like jump in with
Yep.
conversation.
Are there any particular parts of like any particular objective or anything that we were confused about?
Well, I was a bit confused about the mode.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was.
Where is that?
I feel like she explained it.
Effective
Yes.
use of mode appropriate features. So that's spelling, punctuation, and layout. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think like the pictures.
Overall
falls into
conventions,
that.
images, and like headings and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Then I think that's fine.
Okay. And do we have a good understanding of like the difference between the mode appropriate features and and in organisation development, the patterns and conventions of an article and the role of the writer to achieve? Like, is that like if mode appropriate features are grammar and spelling and
Spelling and punctuation.
and the layout of it, that makes sense. But then the just patterns and conventions of an article, is that should we say that that's like the paragraphing of it and
Tone. I interpret that as like the tone of
Okay.
the writing
Yeah, yeah.
in engaging the reader.
Yeah, because
as
it
in
says the
public
purpose of engaging a public
Yes.
audience.
audience.
yeah, that makes sense.
And how they use things like they might use a rhetorical question or something like that.
Yeah, I get what you mean.
Which is
That's what
very indicative of. That's how I
That's
interpret
what
it.
I've
More like
highlighted,
tone
yeah.
based and those conventions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool. Alright, awesome.
Lovely.
So, first one.
Should we say generally what we gave them
Yes.
overall?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I gave them, I changed it a little bit, an 18 out of 25.
Okay.
Are we saying why, or are we just...
No.
That could be because I feel like that's our last like overall
Yeah.
feedback thing. So maybe that's a lot once we've all
Okay, great.
done.
18 out of 25.
Okay.
I had initially a 16 out of 25. But yeah, there's a few ones that I was unsure about whether I had done it accurately. So I'm very open to discussion. But yeah, sorry, 16 from me.
I did a 20 out of 25. Again, could be wrong, could be right. But I tried to do that thing that Julie said where you give them marks, you don't take away marks.
Yeah.
I tried.
Yeah.
I gave them an 18 out of 25. So.
I gave them a 17. Yeah. Cool. I was trying to find stuff to not bring them down.
Yeah.
That's the big thing I found.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like pointing out little errors and being like, oh, well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also found that because I tried to do the thing where you read it all first to kind of give your time to the student.
Yeah.
But then I wonder if because I'm as a whole, I was like, oh yeah, this kind of sits as being an effective response for me. Then that gave me bias then when I was doing each dot point.
Yeah.
I don't know. Anyway, we'll go through it when we do each
Yeah.
dot point.
So we've got 1 16, 1 17, 2 18s, and a 20.
Yeah.
So it's pretty good. There's only a 4 mark
mark.
difference between
Yeah.
top and bottom. So, alright. Okay.
Yeah.
One.
Knowledge application, perspectives, analysis of perspectives and representations on concepts, identities, times, and or places in the text. What did you think?
I gave them an effective. My evidence was in... What paragraph is that?
Oh, I haven't been down paragraphs either.
Evidence was on the second page in that little paragraph just underneath the picture, starting with by making direct references to the disasters of the past. I said that it was effective due to the students' incorporation of concepts like xenophobia and totalitarianism, and those being very key, and they do use them throughout the text.
Yep.
But I did think that their identities and times weren't as strong, hence why it's an effective and not a discerning.
Yeah. I also gave it an effective for that. I had a little bit of evidence in the first paragraph at the bottom, where they kind of talk about like the government's passing like a far-fetched idea of the 21st century, and I had that more in like the times bit, but I thought like the representations of concepts throughout the whole was pretty good. Like they had a lot, but I think times and like the places more, that was why lacking, hence why it was effective and not a discerning. Yeah.
I also gave it an effective, and I had the same evidence as you with the xenophobia. I thought that was really well done. It's good like analysis and drawing an opinion with the Goldstein thing as well. I thought that was really good. But yeah, I didn't see much mention of time in there, comparing 1984 and Children of Men, because they're set quite far apart. Like I think Children of Men set in 2027, 1984 is supposed to be set in 1984, and I thought maybe they could have talked about that, and you know, when the book was written and when the movie was released. But you know, they still did well with the concepts and that, so effective.
Great. I gave it effective as well. I had very similar evidence. Most of my evidence came from, that, what is that? The second page there talking about xenophobia. And yes, I did really like that they spoke about different concepts and like identities, even talking about like the Nazi regime and things like that. I think they did a really good job of identifying that, although that comes into cultural beliefs and stuff, so that's mostly the next one. But yeah, I found that I couldn't quite justify giving it a discerning, just because I felt as though when it came to times, there was a lot of, well not a lot, but a couple of examples of them saying things like, as we know, hatred of another can only lead down a dark path, and it's just a big claim to make about time without having a lot of evidence to support it. And like saying that our government is definitely heading this way or things like that. I understand that's where they're going, but just how they're portraying time, they don't support that with a lot of evidence. So like that's
Thanks, Beck. I also gave it effective for that dot point. The reason being, I actually highlighted their thesis, which is like the second little paragraph, because I felt that those concepts that they introduce about totalitarianism and government control is sustained throughout the assignment, and then that is supported when they talk about those concepts of xenophobia and I think fear of the other, the concept of the other. It's a concept, but it's also relates to representations of identity, because of the other is an identity. So I did feel that coming through, and I felt it was sustained across the assignment and that it was effective overall, because it sustains that focus.
Awesome. Okay, so everyone is that effective? Cool. Okay, so that's agreed upon. I think they spoke about it quite often, but I don't think they spoke about it in enough detail to get them to the discerning.
Yes, agreed.
That's the
Especially times and place.
Yeah, they did a lot, but they didn't really
Yeah.
hone it in. Like, I think there was three
Yeah.
different analysis. Like, they did the technology, they did the xenophobia. I think there was another one, or it was just,
Urban decay.
decay.
Yeah.
which
As
is
a
a
concept.
lot
Yeah.
to go through without getting into that specific detail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Agreed. Okay, good. Okay, so next one is the analysis of the ways cultural assumptions, I gave that one a discerning. My evidence for that was, where is it? On the third page, at the very bottom, the beginning of the last paragraph, where they say Orwell positions the reader to fully understand and acknowledge the dangerous consequences of autocratic governance. I said it was discerning because I thought the student, I mean, they literally say Orwell positions the reader to but I think even just in that paragraph they continue to talk about how they're linking it to like real world issues, and they consistently link it with the other author, like Orwell, and then they start talking about Children of Man later. I just thought when they talk about attitudes, values and beliefs, I just feel like it's pretty well rounded throughout the whole article. I think they did a good job of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had for that one effective. I did use the same evidence, so I said Orwell positions the reader to fully understand and acknowledge the dangerous consequences of autocratic government. I said that statement was really good, as it literally says the position that he is inviting the readers to take. The cultural assumptions, attitudes, values and beliefs, I kind of struggle with sometimes finding the difference between effective and discerning, mainly because I think the third page is really, really good. I'm talking on that, but I think initially, especially the second page, I feel like it's quite clunky, and there's lots of stuff where I feel like it's kind of just thrown in there for the sake of being in there, lots of evidence and stuff. But yeah, so I gave that one effective.
Yeah, I also gave it effective. I think my evidence was on the bottom of the second page. It's the last sentence. I like how the student compared sort of our own world to the author's. Although the student keeps sort of saying we could reach this point, they're still reminding the reader that it's not, we're not at that stage, and supplying that surveillance. But I did struggle to find the cultural values, attitudes and beliefs through it, other than the xenophobia one. I thought that was straight up, they did that, but then they just never went sort of back to it. They never mentioned it again.
Yeah. I gave it effective as well. There was quite a few things that I liked in there. I liked that you could see the cultural assumptions, values and beliefs, especially when they're talking about the Nazi concentration camps, and then also making the same connection for the Orwell text as well. However, I don't think I could quite give it discerning, because kind of looking around at the bottom of page 2, I agree, saying that the page 2 kind of lacked this. On page 3 they did it better. But yeah, on page 2, when they're talking about the Nazi regime and their hatred of Jewish people, I just found that the evidence following that wasn't quite discerning, and I feel as though they could have gone into more depth about the cultural assumptions, attitudes. They've made a good point linking it to the Nazi thing, as well as because they've got up here, freedom through work. I thought that was really good, making that connection, but I just feel the next one kind of lacked it as well. So yeah, I feel like altogether that kind of makes it effective, but I couldn't quite bump it up to discerning.
The evidence that I pulled from for this dot point was, like you said, when they refer back to the Nazi concentration camps, and I initially said that was adequate analysis, because it does show how the text is underpinned by the cultural attitudes, values and beliefs associated with the Nazi concentration camps, and how that informs the author's choices in creating illusion. But in that particular example, I didn't see the student explicitly say how that positioned the reader to respond. So I saw the evidence really strongly there of the relation to the cultural attitudes, values and beliefs, but not that link to positioning the the reader. But I do see across the response times where they've either touched on the cultural attitudes, values, beliefs really well, but haven't linked it to positioning the reader, or other times when they have talked explicitly about positioning the reader, but that doesn't specifically relate to cultural attitudes, values, beliefs.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you, Niamh, with your example that you pulled out, can you just clarify with me how that related to cultural attitudes, values and beliefs? I feel like that might come from a lack of understanding on my part, but just some clarification there, because I can see how it's positioning the reader, but what cultural attitude, value, belief are they speaking about there?
I think after listening to what everyone said, I would probably give it an effective as well. And I think that was my lack of understanding with this particular evidence. That they even, them saying, they position the reader for this, that doesn't necessarily mean that they've then expanded on what that actually means. I think I looked at that one.
Yeah.
But I agree that they do it in some points where they're talking about positioning the reader, and some points where they're only talking about attitudes, values, beliefs, and cultural assumptions. I just think generally, because they have mentioned those attitudes, values, and beliefs throughout most of it, and they do occasionally talk about positioning the reader, I think they've done it well enough to give it a discerning. I'm trying to think of it as like the student has done it, and you can tell that they've thought about those. I just think I think sometimes the evidence doesn't support it very well. I do understand why you would all say effective, and I would feel comfortable putting it down because I understand.
Well, Grace said adequate.
And on reflection, because something that I didn't pull out, because the only thing I initially pulled out was the reference to World War II and the Holocaust, but what Max said about xenophobia, that is a cultural attitude, and I just missed that. I kind of interpreted that more as a concept, but it is a cultural attitude as well. Drawing on that, so that is more evidence to suggest that they've been involved or included analysis of how cultural attitudes, values and beliefs underpin the novel and the movie. I'm just looking back to where they talk about xenophobia.
That's on
second page.
Second page.
Second paragraph. And then they talk about it again in the fourth.
So they say they carefully craft this message to express to the reader how xenophobia, fear and hatred only create a more authoritarian state. I feel like that's definitely more evidence there where they have related the cultural assumptions, attitudes, values and beliefs to positioning the reader, like the effect that has on the reader by directly making that link. So I digress. I don't think it's adequate. I think it is more effective.
I would agree. I would agree to putting it to effective, but I think it's also important to remember that the student doesn't have to have it what Julie was saying, it doesn't have to be consistent throughout the whole thing. I feel like that's where any of us would kind of trip up and go, oh, well, they've, done it twice here, but they haven't done it throughout the rest of the thing. But they've done it twice, so they've shown you that they can.
It is a really good analysis.
Yeah.
It's a really good analysis.
Yeah. I think particularly like that xenophobia stuff with the cultural assumptions and everything, like they've done very well.
Yes.
And I think even if they don't do it well 75% of the time, like, and not even well, like it's not like they've done badly, they just might not have elaborated enough. And like effective, I think, is fair because they've done it once when they could have done it 5 times, but I feel like if they did it 2 or 3 times, I feel like that's when we can say, oh no, they've done that well, and then it could be a discerning. But I think effective is fair for that.
Yeah.
That's
Was there anyone else who wanted to add anything else to that point?
No.
Okay.
cool.
Number 3.
That one, that
one
point
gets
trips me up.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't even. I couldn't figure out what.
And it's so hard to try and remember. Now, what was I taught when I was learning this? Like, what does it? Anyway. Okay. Analysis of the effects of aesthetic features and/or stylistic devices. What did you think, Lilly?
I had discerning for that, for discerning analysis of the effects of all those. I think my evidence was I think on the second page, like so much, there was imagery, they talked about intertextuality, then you flip over, lots of like symbolism, and then they talked about motive down in here, and I just said this was done, this was done really well. There was multiple aesthetic features and stylistic devices that were analysed from the text, and they've actually, like, in their analysis of it, like, for example, the symbolism one, they've gone, the implementation of telescreens into this world symbolises the ever-watching eye of oppressive governments cracking down on blah, 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 blah. So I think that was really good. And just because there was multiple, I think that's what gave it discerning in my point. I think, like, it was, instead of being effective, like, I think they did that really well. Like, they really honed in on talking about the different ones. That's why I gave it a discerning.
Yeah, I gave it an effective, but after you just talked about them, I would potentially switch it to discerning because, like, that whole third page, like, they're just sort of, they're really hitting the nail.
Yeah.
Like, they're just going through everything, and they're going into it quite deep as well. Like, they're being short with it. They're I don't know what the word is, but, like, they're getting to the point sort of thing. They're showing good, and then they're comparing and contrasting as well. So, like, I think the last paragraph on the third page, especially with the image that they use to, like, when they've described, the setting and all that, and then comparing the motif of decay, like, I think they have done really well there, so I would probably switch it to discerning because I think they've really done, like, that's probably one of their strongest parts of this whole essay.
I was quite different to everyone else. I gave it adequate, and I probably would definitely bump it up just because I honestly, as you were saying, I completely kind of didn't recognise symbolism, and although I underlined intertextuality, I just didn't really think about that as a stylistic device. I just mostly focused on the aesthetic features. I just feel as though when it came to talking about, like, on page 3 on the bottom paragraph, I think when it was talking about like the slums of London and stuff, and then the motif of urban decay, I found those couple of sentences just a little bit repetitive and not super effective in what they were trying to say, and a bit clunky. Like, and the dark tint used to film create this motif of urban decay. I just feel they said urban decay like 3 times. It's been really close. And like the crumbling slums of London, and then to say, like, spread around the entirety of London. I just feel as though they probably could have done that a little bit better. I would have liked to have heard more about the dark tint, how that makes the audience feel, like why they chose to do that rather than just stating that they did. in hindsight, I would move it up to effective. I don't know about discerning, but like if everyone is down with that, I'm fine with that. But yeah, that was just my reasoning for doing it a little bit lower.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
That's me.
Yeah. I had agreed with some of your points about how they mentioned a lot of great things, for example, the dark tint, but didn't quite hit the mark of explaining the effect of that. I felt that when they spoke about the technology and the symbolism associated with that, they did that really well. The specific evidence that I highlighted for this dot point was the screens and TVs seen throughout the film advertise different items that used to be seen as a given, such as clean water, symbolising the downfall of society and the commodification of basic needs under authoritarian governments. I think we can all agree that it wasn't worded the best, but that's not this criteria. The point that they're making there of the symbolism of the TVs, I think they have effectively analysed that there. The question that I want to pose to the group after, obviously, you say what you thought, Niamh, is, yes, they've used a lot of aesthetic features and stylistic devices, like illusion, symbolism, urban decay, motif, sorry. Do we think they use them all accurately? I know for me, when they mention intertextuality, that didn't sit right with me that they've used that correctly, because that is more alluding to World War II, the Holocaust, rather than the Holocaust is not a text, which is what intertextuality is, making reference to other texts. But I just want to pose that question after you say your piece, Niamh.
I found, because I thought the same thing. I was like, they're saying intertextuality, but they're comparing it to a real world situation and a text. But I researched what kind of comes under intertextuality, and it did say text and real world situation.
Yeah. Okay.
So that could be some random thing on the internet, but it was just, as I looked through it, it was like you could do a text and a text and a movie, text and real world. And so in my head I was like, okay, well, yeah, they've done that, even if they kind of didn't realise. But my evidence was the same that Max had, where on the third page, the final paragraph, where he's talking about motifs and urban decay and all that, I think that it's discerning. I think they talk about motif and symbolism and what was the other one? And intertextuality. What is it? Where is it? Imagery. I think intertextuality they speak about once, but the other three they kind of talk about multiple times, which I think shows that they are connecting it to other parts of the text, and this text describes this, and also this text does this. But I think, and you mentioned as well, Grace, but I think it wouldn't be adequate. Just because I know, Beck, you said that in the evidence that I found where they're saying the crumbling slums of London and the dark tint used to film create this, like, I know that it's a bit clunky, but that I feel like we should look at what idea they're communicating rather than how they've communicated it, because that's part of like the grammatical accuracy and language and things like that. So if that was, if we were marking them together, then I would understand if it was adequate or effective, but I feel like because that's a separate thing, then anyway. But yeah, I said discerning because I thought they did really well. I thought they linked both of the texts together well, and they were quite consistent in using it. Like it was kind of present throughout the whole article. Yeah. Yeah. What was the question you?
Have they done it all accurately?
Well, have they, when they've spoken about each
Yeah.
aesthetic feature and stylistic device, have they done it all accurately? Which I think the main one that didn't sit well with me was the intertextuality one, but when they talk about urban decay, I do agree that's a motif, but I suppose they're also kind of talking about setting in general.
Yeah.
But I suppose at a year 12 level, they don't need to say setting.
Yeah.
When they're talking about setting.
Yeah.
I'm still just not convinced that each time they've analysed the features, that they've analysed the effect of the features.
Yes, that's
what's holding me back.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
We're just throwing it out there and then just being like, that's it.
Yeah.
They do a
Talking
good
about the next one.
Yeah, they do a good job of saying that, like, it symbolises the downfall of society, or they use this darker tint and the motif of urban decay, but they don't really say how that affects.
That has.
Yeah, effective analysis of the effects of aesthetic features, like that effects part, I think is really crucial, and I just don't think they've done that discerningly.
Yeah.
I think they've probably done it, effectively, but I just don't think that I could bump it up to discerning.
Yeah. Okay.
It is hard because I think they do show evidence of making that link discerningly. I think the technology part
Yeah.
is
that was good.
quite good.
Yeah.
But I'm struggling to make a judgment on balance across the whole paper, because I think they definitely do show evidence of discerning, and they do show evidence of effective, and I don't know how to
I just think most
approach that.
often they but I know that doesn't really matter.
I know. It's hard because I personally think I'd still give them a discerning, because I do understand like analysing the effects of it, but I think they do it particularly in the technology part, and I think they do it somewhat in the in that final part where they're talking about motif. I just feel like it's enough to bump them up to a discerning. I thought it was kind of, in some ways, it was one of the stronger parts of their article when they're talking about
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I think for me, maybe I can see how, analysis of those things could be seen to be discerning, and maybe what's holding them back is their selection and synthesis of subject matter, which is, I know, in the next criterion, but because those things are so intertwined.
Yeah.
They could have gone a bit deeper as well. Like, I think they tried to cover too many bases.
Yeah.
I think
there's too many.
the first two topics, I think they could have done fine, and they go in and out, like they flow within each other. I think if they just would have stuck to that, I think they would have hit those discerning markers quite easily. Like, it's there.
The imagery and the intertextuality is like super quick, one sentence, and then they're done. Whereas the symbolism is like the whole, and the motif is the whole second page.
Yeah.
You really get into it. It's just
Yeah. Maybe to reach consensus, we should just briefly list what feature they used throughout, and then if they linked it to the effect of it. Sorry, I didn't word that very well, and see if there is more evidence of discerning as opposed to effective.
Yeah.
So, the first thing that I see them talk about is imagery.
Yeah.
Where's that?
That's when they talk about...
Second page, third paragraph.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
So just about that image.
Grim imagery, and illusion and intertextuality all in the one para.
Yeah, I think that's effective.
Yeah. They haven't. They've talked about three things and haven't effectively hit the mark of
The effects of it.
the effect of this is that.
Yeah.
They've just said what it is.
Whereas if they just focused on one, they could have had more
That's what
space
they did
to-
really good here,
exactly.
which is hard.
Yeah.
But then I think they've done that with where they talk about technology and symbolism. Because they say symbolism is used through both dystopian fictions to create not unlike our own. Orwell depicts the world with constant government surveillance. And then continues to talk about it in the implementations of world symbolizes the ever watching. And then they put in evidence of, if like they put in a quote from, I think, 1984. Like I feel like they've done that well, and they've given themselves enough room to do it well without talking about something else. And then with motif again, I think that they've done that. That was my reason.
The hard thing with the ISMGs is like what they say is like if it's there, you really don't focus on the negatives. Like if it's there, you gotta give
if
it.
they're evidence.
And
that's
that's what I
like. Maybe they haven't done that with the other three, but they have done a discerning job of doing symbolism.
Like, I think it's important that we
You know what I
see
mean?
that they can do it. And even though they haven't done it for this particular thing, they have done it for this, and therefore it is discerning.
Yeah, I'm convinced. I think we could give them discerning for that, and then it's something that we think about in their selection and synthesis of subject matter.
That's what I think.
Where they've done too much.
I agree.
Because regardless, if we give it, I know, like obviously we need a discerning or an effective, but they still receive a 7. You know what I mean? So it's not bumping them up or down.
Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
Do you feel okay about that?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Sweet, yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So yes.
And then
That is still a 7.
Yeah, I feel good.
so mine I had an 8 overall for that one, and now it's a 7, and I'm quite happy with that.
Yeah.
That was probably
Next criteria.
yes, guys.
Make this snappy.
Right. So that's
Quick decisions
35
are
minutes.
coming. That's right, and the textual features won't take very long.
No.
Now that we know what we're doing.
Yeah. Okay, let's zoom through it.
Okay. Use of patterns and conventions of an article, column, blog, essay. What do you think, Max?
I said, looking back on it, I did say suitable, but I think it could be effective. I think the front with the whole Guardian thing, I did like, it was a good sort of opener, it was a good question to have. It's eye-catching. The only thing I didn't really get is the photo. The use of police, they don't really then go into it in the rest of the essay. I think maybe have 2 images of 1984, or that was just me. But I mean, the rest of it is really laid out well, and I think especially the imagery, the images that they use, all sort of placed strategically, especially the Big Brother photo. I think it's a good comparison. It sort of leads both pages because it looks like Hitler. It looks like what they've talked before, and it relates to now. I think subconsciously the reader's just gonna be like, oh my god, these things relate. I think, and then especially the scene that they use from Children of Men, it's just what they're explaining in motif. And I think their layout's really good. The sentences aren't too big, they're not too small. I'm not reading every paragraph being like, oh my god, can we talk about something else? I think, do probably take it back. Probably might give it effective. Yeah.
I actually put that as discerning for mine. I felt as though the layout was something that was good. See, this is what I mean. It's so different. Anyway, I felt that the layout was good. I liked they had the subtitles. I like that they used a rhetorical question at the start. I thought it hooked the readers in really well. To me, that says that they understand the patterns and conventions of a blog and how to engage a public audience. I think they did well. I was engaged while I was reading it. I agree in that I didn't feel like they spent too long on one thing. I felt like it was snappy. It was good. So yes, my evidence for that was just the look of it at the start. So the title, subtitle, and then the rhetorical question at the start. I think I really liked that. So I think that was kind of my yeah, part. So that's why I gave it discerning.
Awesome. Good.
For this one, I gave it effective use of patterns and conventions, and the evidence I highlighted was their first paragraph, and I said the same thing. I said it was effective because uses the rhetorical question, it relates to 21st century issues, it uses, and I know this is not language choices, but the tone is indicative of being for a public audience. But yeah, those specific things are effective for the purpose of engaging a public audience.
Yeah.
And yeah, I felt that was sustained throughout the sun.
Yeah. I was the same as Becca. I said discerning as well. I thought the layout was what it needed to be. I thought it was really well done. I thought the images they used and where they placed them was good as well because it linked in with the texts. And yeah, that first paragraph, it's what I felt you should be reading in an article. Like, they've done that well. And discerning, I thought it was all well done. I couldn't see any reason why it shouldn't be.
I also had discerning, and my evidence, I said, like, they used multiple images, they all supported the article, especially like the image placing related to each paragraph that they were talking about. I liked the heading and the subheading. Like, the article web header was really good. The author image, even though we were saying they didn't write the author, I still thought that was good. And yeah, the first paragraph, like the rhetorical question, especially hooking you in, which I thought was engaging. And if I was reading an article, yeah, that's the sort of thing that would hook me in straight away. So that's why I gave it discerning, because I think it was like an article, literary article.
Yeah. So what did we end up having? Discerning.
Look, I'll go with discerning. Like, I'd give it discerning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Discerning.
I think I'd initially gone effective because there was some.
Understand effective. I was really on the fence about it.
I think I'd initially gone effective because there was some times where it wasn't discerning. Like, there were, like, for example, that paragraph about what makes a democracy. That wasn't done particularly well. Because what popular belief are they referring to? I'm not sure.
I don't know either. I know I read that. I was like, just not my belief. I know.
Which one?
Yeah, actually, yeah.
By who? Yeah.
But
Which
like,
country?
but again, it's about reframing a perspective about what evidence you do see, and I think there is evidence of discerning there, even if that's not always 100% consistent.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would be convinced to go discerning.
Yeah, and I thought, but you said earlier about the tone of it as well.
Yeah.
I forgot to mention that, or even forgot to have it in my evidence or anything. But yeah, the tone of it, I was reading it and I thought this is an article on the website that you would read.
Yeah.
I think, for that one.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, cool.
Okay.
Beck, do you want to start with the next one?
Selection and synthesis of subject matter to support perspectives. Let's see what I had here. So, I said effective selection and synthesis of subject matter. So, evidence of this is that I had on the third page, the implementation of telescreens into the world symbolises the ever-changing watching eye, blah, blah, blah. I thought that especially on the third page, they did a really good job of selecting things that showed symbolism. I really liked how they used the technology to demonstrate that, and I think they did it in a way that was snappy, and I know that I can't give evidence of that, but yes, I think it was concise. However, why I didn't have it as discerning was just because for the subject matter to support perspectives, I felt as though, especially when it came to their quotations, I felt as though there wasn't enough support around their quotes to make them discerning. Like, with I didn't understand this sentence in the second page, last paragraph. This unjustified hatred is also alluded to within the 2 minutes of hate, a hideous grinding speech. Like, I didn't understand that, and I felt as though it wasn't well supported. And then a bit similar on, where was the next? They had another quote somewhere, I think. Oh yeah, rotting 19th century houses. Yes, I felt as though they could have then explained it. I felt as though it's never really good when you put the quote at the end of the paragraph and then move on. I felt as though they could have expanded on that. So they selected the subject matter effectively, but to get discerning, I would have liked to have seen them support their perspectives better, what they selected. I felt as though they didn't do that.
What did you think?
I was very similar. I said effective as well. My evidence was at the very end of the second page where they say this unjustified hatred, and I know it's not worded very well and that comes under a different criteria, but the insert of the quote didn't make a lot of sense to me and the justification of it wasn't there. But yeah, I agree. The ideas and the concepts they decided to talk about were well selected, but I think the evidence they then chose to support it with probably wasn't the best evidence they could have chosen, and then further on they then didn't, with that evidence they then didn't justify it and support it enough.
I also went effective. I used that quote here, so this unjustified, but that was kind of more as a negative explanation of like the evidence part of what I feel like they didn't do particularly well, because I feel like for their evidence here they needed to explain it more. It kind of just didn't really make sense to me, but I thought throughout majority, because we don't want to focus on the negatives, it was pretty good. Like their selection and synthesis of subject matter was pretty good throughout, especially like I keep going back to the third page, but I feel like that whole page was pretty good. There was only a few other times, and I agree with the other example that you gave as to why that would be more effective than discerning, because I think especially when they're putting in, you know, bits of evidence that don't really link or need to be like further explained or expanded on, you can't really bump that up to discerning, I would say. But as a whole, I thought like there was enough of it was effective to still be in that category.
Yeah, I also said effective. I like the evidence that they sort of selected for the first couple paragraphs on page 2, but I think, as you guys were saying, like, then they're just sort of throwing in evidence without sort of any reason or any explanation. But then it does pick up heavily on the third page. Like, they're using really good pieces of evidence to back up why this is, and you guys sort of said the points I had, but I think their selection of evidence is good, but I don't see them going as in depth as they could go. Like I sort of, as you said before, with the motif, like the last one, they just sort of keep saying the same thing over and over. I think it could have been nice to use different evidence. You know, is this like in 1984? Like, I think focusing on that would have been a bit nicer to see. But other than that, it was really well done.
Cool. What about you guys?
This one, I went suitable selection and adequate synthesis. The example I pulled out was that part where they're talking about Goldstein, the Brotherhood, and linking it to the hideous grinding speech. Because they've used multiple pieces of evidence there, I can see that as evidence of attempting to synthesize those parts to draw it into a whole. And when I was doing this, I did have to go back to the UCAA glossary and look at what synthesize means, because I don't always fully, I just need that reminder. But I can see that they have evidence of them trying to draw ideas together, but I didn't think that they explicitly linked those.
Yeah.
That it felt like they've just taken the subject matter being the evidence, and just put it in there.
Yeah.
But maybe you guys can help me understand or see whether I've just made a harsh judgment for that particular part.
Yeah.
And how it's, across the whole assignment.
Yeah.
What it also looked like.
I agree with what you're saying. I just think there's enough evidence that shows that they've done it effectively. Like we can't kind of give them. They've done one thing not very well, so we've got to give it that. They've done these things well, so you know what? And we've talked about that before. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying, and I do think that they could have selected evidence better, and they could have then synthesized them better. But I think generally they did okay. But definitely not discerning. They haven't.
I definitely don't think it's discerning.
I felt this one was probably one of the trickiest.
I do too. Yeah.
Because maybe it was one of the ones that was pretty inconsistent.
I was going to say, I feel like this one is probably the most inconsistent. The difference between page 2 and page 3
is huge.
Yeah.
That's where I'm even like it. I could definitely see how it could be suitable.
Yeah.
As well.
And I can definitely also see how it can be effective.
I think that's when it brings back to like, even if there is evidence of this, like it's, how like originally we were looking at the negatives and like they haven't done that, they haven't done that.
Yeah.
Whereas we need to be, they have done this, but it's not a discerning.
It's
level.
not a discerning.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think if we can agree that there is evidence of effective selection, we should do it.
Yeah.
Yes. Can we just summarize that? Can we kind of explicitly say, well, what is an explicit example of an effective response?
Yeah.
And if there's a few of those,
Yeah.
because I can side with you guys on this one. But I think it just would be good just to confirm.
Yeah. And I think evidence can also include not just the quote that they've used, but also, like them talking about the ideas and concepts in the novel is also evidence.
For my evidence for this one, I had the implementation of tally screens into this world symbolises the ever-watching eye of the Project government's cracking down. Yes, I think they chose that well, and I think in the following paragraph when they're talking about more technology, I think they also did that really well. For both of those things, they chose, I think, very good points, and there was enough analysis there for it to be effective. They link it well, it's smooth.
Yeah, I have in the third paragraph on that same page, starting with the screens and TV scenes throughout the film advertise different items that are used to be seen as given, such as clean water, symbolising the downfall of which that is evidence in itself. And then they go on to talk about governments around the world already use technology to better control people.
Sorry, I've just noticed. I think that image that they've used of the big brother is watching you, I would count that as evidence from the novel as well.
Yeah.
Which I think, is effective there. Okay, I think that is...
Does anyone else have any other evidence?
No.
You guys are the same.
Okay, so effective. For that one. Okay. Alright, Grace, do you want to start off with the organisation sequencing?
Let me see where I said that, sorry.
No, it's alright.
So I said effective here, and the part that I pulled out was where they contrast the two different authors' approaches to technology, and I think they were using the contrast as a effective cohesive device to emphasize the idea of the symbolism of the technology, and ultimately emphasize that even though both authors had different approaches, they ultimately both communicate or warn against totalitarianism.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really effective, and I thought, that was indicative of a pattern across the response where they've structured it well. They've got the, they talk about, what is it that they talk about first? Like the xenophobia and othering. Then they talk about the technology, and they use that contrast as a cohesive device, and then they talk about the urban decay. I think it's overall effective in how they've sequenced that subject.
I said discerning. I thought your piece of evidence where they're contrasting was great, but then they also have evidence of comparing them. So in the part where they're talking about motifs, that very last sentence, both authors use the same motif of decay to represent I think they do a good job, and they do mention it a few other times where they talk about both authors do this, or this is evidence of this author doing it. Similarly, Orwell does it. They have it somewhere. Oh yeah, in the second page, on the second from the bottom paragraph, by making direct references to the disasters of the past, does this in Children of Man, and then similarly Orwell also uses historical illusion. I thought that they compared and contrasted discerningly, and they did it in an organised way. It flowed well, and
I had effective. I put out 2 bits of evidence where it was, both examples were comparing both of the authors. So I had like the first one, by alluding to destructive governments of the past, both Orwell and Corin underline the danger of allowing xenophobia to run rampant in society, yada yada. And then later on they also go, both authors use the same motif to decay to represent the destructive nature of totalitarian regimes and how the people are the most effective. And I thought that was more effective than, I would say, discerning. I can definitely see your point. I don't know, I just didn't think, it's hard to say now that there was enough. I thought like their cohesive devices were, like they were effective, and both the authors, like what Grace said, like had different approaches to what they were talking about, but got to the same kind of outcome, they were agreeing. So I can see how it could be both discerning, but originally I did have effective for it.
Cool.
Yeah, so I had effective as well. I found the comparisons really sort of flowed like it was, and they weren't sort of using like the same sentence starters, like however or contrasting. They either use the author's name or they just like went straight into it. I think I found it flow very well with their comparisons, and like you were saying with the xenophobia one, that like it sort of all it went well together. I thought effective. I sort of struggled with that one. That one was not my favourite one. I didn't really quite understand it, but I would give it effective.
Cool. I also had effective for the same reasons, basically, as we've spoken about. I liked how they did comparison well, I feel. But I guess the reason I didn't have it as discerning was that at times, especially when it came to their quotes, I felt as though it wasn't cohesive, their use of quotes, and it didn't emphasize the ideas that I think they wanted to make.
Yeah.
So that's why I didn't give it discerning. I just felt as though, especially when it came to, as I said, their quotes, I felt as though a lot of them, or a couple of them, were put in a bit randomly, and I know that we've gone over that, but kind of like the hideous grinding speech, I didn't understand that as to why it was put in there. And I just felt as though if I was to give discerning, I would need it to flow a lot more smoothly, to have the quotes connected, all of that, and for it to make sense altogether. But I just couldn't find that. But I could find evidence of them linking the overall paragraphs really well.
I think it's hard because this part is almost two separate things. Like, it's discerning organisation of sequencing of subject matter, including discerning use. Like, I feel like they're almost two separate things. So in my, like, I understand effectiveness, but in my mind it's almost like they've effectively organised and sequenced the subject matter, but they've been discerning in the use of cohesive devices and connecting parts of the text. Do you know what I mean? I almost feel like they've done well in this part, but not so well in this part.
Didn't it used to be two separate documents?
I think so.
But then they've
merged it.
document. Yeah.
But then I think because they've done that part discerningly, it should be bumped up to a discerning. That's just my argument, is that if they've done this part discerningly, then it...
I just don't know if they have, though.
Yeah.
That's
And
what
I
I'm stuck on.
am comfortable with having it as effective.
What about you guys?
Yeah, I'm still effective.
Yeah.
And I think that they did, especially when they start discussing the two texts, like after kind of the whole introductory sentence, they organise their paragraphs effectively there.
Yeah.
But I agree that within those, I'm not sure if they sequence the ideas or the quotes discerningly.
Yeah.
But I think it's effective. I think it achieves the purpose that they're set out to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, in that introductory section, I think a lot of those parts feel a bit disjoint as well, especially that, I know it's an introduction, but paragraph where they talk about what is a democracy and what is a whatever, they haven't really linked that there well, and I know that's one example, but I do think that the pattern across the response is effective.
Well, that's what you said. You said the first bit would be effective, but then the cohesive would be discerning.
Yeah. So I'm comfortable having it as effective. Like, I understand what you guys have said.
I think,
I reckon that's good.
Yeah, cool. Alright, effective. Okay, so overall,
6.
So that's a 6.
6. Okay, so again, mine, I had it as a 7, and now it's a 6. And that's all. Okay, textual features. Holy.
Let's go.
Okay, last one.
This one?
Okay,
This one's wrong.
No.
I can start us off. Effective. I gave it effective language choices for particular purposes. Although I could be convinced that it was discerning. I wasn't sure for this one. Because I felt as though they used a lot of isms.
Yes.
Yeah.
But they used them correctly.
Yes.
Correctly. I was really quite impressed, actually, as to how they used them.
Yeah.
I felt as though their vocabulary was well picked and well placed.
Yes.
So, yes, the only reason I just felt language choices couldn't be discerning was probably just because of the number of errors that they had.
Yes.
I just think it shows a lack. It's just they haven't read it over, I think, is what's happened. Especially when they have that sentence that doesn't go anywhere at the start of page 2. Like, so yeah, I don't know exactly. That probably comes more under, like...
I think I would argue that is a different
Yes,
objective.
exactly, yeah. Yeah, so for language choices for particular purposes, I probably could be convinced it's discerning, but it had effective originally.
Yeah.
I don't want to go next.
I had it as effective as well. My piece of evidence was in... Where is my piece of evidence? Third page, fourth paragraph, where they say, placing control of the population over the needs of people is consistently reinforced by the grimy urban sprawl of London in both dystopian fiction's a visual reminder of the hellish conditions. I thought,
That is good.
yeah, I think that is probably their best sentence.
I pulled out the same.
Yeah,
Me too.
they've, you know, the words like grimy and hellish, but also still using words like control and reinforced and dystopian and authoritarianism, like that's all in one sentence. So I thought of sentences, that was really great. But it's their best, and I feel like they don't really have that same level.
There's not enough of it.
It's not throughout the rest of it, and that's when it's like benefit them by giving them a discerning, because they've done that really well. But I think this is where it comes to the point of like, okay, they've done that discerning, but everything else is effective. I think they've placed words well, like all the isms, but the tone of the article still isn't quite. It's not. Those words are there to be emotive, and they can be emotive in this assignment. I thought words were placed well when they were, but I thought they just weren't placed often enough. Yeah.
I gave it effective. I pulled out the same bit of evidence, and I thought, especially that bit in that paragraph was really, really good. But to not give it a discerning, I don't think there was enough of it, especially going back to like the second page. It's almost like it was written by a different person, I feel.
Literally.
Like, I feel like that was really good. Vocab, especially language choices, was really good. It flowed really nicely, but I don't think it was consistent enough the whole article to give it a discerning.
And I feel, sorry to jump in, I feel like it's also language choices for a particular purpose, and the purpose of the article is to they can be emotive, and they can have opinions that are their own, and I feel like they were a bit too what's the word, analytical with it. I thought they could have been a bit more emotive and emotional.
I gave it effective as well. On the sentence back, I could be convinced to discerning. I think the second half of that third page, really well written. I really liked it. I think, like you were saying before, the words that they used were trying to get their point across and sort of describing what they saw and what the author and the filmmaker had intended sort of to give across of what these governments sort of do to the conditions of where they live. I think, although they're like not the most sophisticated words, like they're just simple and you get what they mean, and I think it's just really well placed, and I think they did really well there and effective.
I'm the same. I initially went effective. I could be convinced to go discerning. The evidence that I pulled out was urban decay pervades through blah blah blah, grimy urban sprawl, hellish conditions, and I think those particular language choices achieve the writer's purpose of communicating the dire impact of authoritarian regimes, and I do see those or similar language choices throughout the assignment being discerning in achieving that purpose. I initially went effective, I think, because I felt like there were too many times when they used a not very high level choice of vocab. Like, for example, I remember a clangor that stood out to me as symbolism is used throughout both dystopian fictions to paint a bigger picture about.
I think also they've got, on the second page, one of the last sentence of the second paragraph is, as we know, hatred of another can only lead down a dark path. It's like, I don't really know what that means.
That wasn't a great language choice at all.
Or like when contrary to popular beliefs. What beliefs are you referring to? That's not a very discerning use.
But their language choices in the first paragraph, that opening paragraph, I thought were really well. They were really well placed. The intentions there to grasp the reader. I thought the words were, it's a good purpose. Yes, it sort of then slows down a bit for the opening sentence. Like the selection of words there is really good.
And I think it's that whole idea of, if we can see evidence of discerning language choices, that's what we can afford them. And it doesn't need to be perfect across the whole.
So because we all said effective, but
we're all discerning.
I'm happy to give them discerning, because I think they have done it enough times where it's like, that's they obviously know how to do it.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like it's the next couple criteria that let them down.
Yeah,
Not the
and
language.
this was, and the thing is, I think I also could have leaned towards discerning, but spoiler, I said suitable use of mode appropriate, and that's when she talks about how can you have this in discerning, but this in suitable, and that's where I got tripped up. So I was like, okay, well, I can't have that, but sorry, my boyfriend's ringing.
Sorry, boys, being at uni.
2 more dot points, guys.
Please, just hang on.
Yeah. It is almost. It's like
we got
15.
this.
I have nowhere to be. Does anyone else have anywhere?
No, but we're nearly finished.
Yes, we're nearly finished.
I'd
So
love
we're
to be
fine.
out of here by 6.
Yeah, I was going to say, I have dinner, but...
Okay, discerning. Next dot point. I can start, unless someone else.
No, go for it.
Just start. For use of range of grammatically accurate yada yada yadas, I had effective. I think my piece of evidence was that like random sentence that was started and never finished. Both Children of Men and 1984. That's the worst point of like, okay, terrible grammar, terrible language structure. But I also just think generally like those first couple pages it was difficult to read. None of it flowed very well. I think the points they made were good. You could see that what they were trying to say was effective, but I think the way that they then wrote it wasn't effective. It wasn't discerning. It was effective because then as they went on, like we said, it's almost like someone else is writing it. Like that third page is written really well. Grammar is done very well. Sentence structure and language structure is done well. But I think the funny balance of it means that it's not discerning, even though that third page could be discerning on its own. But it's not terrible. But it's just so clunky that, I feel like effective is a nice medium.
I gave it a suitable, mainly because, especially with the sentence that was incomplete, and then I thought, I don't really know if this could be in the mode one though. I thought there was a few sentences like in the, where is it? Like there was like a couple words missing, like here. Autocracy is always on tipping point, like I said, the tipping point, and then in the last paragraph, like dystopian fictions in our current day world, like I thought day world was a bit like clunky, like it could have just been our current world. I thought there was just too many grammatical issues to give it effective. I thought, because it says like even in suitable use of a range of mostly grammatical. So that's why I was like, I don't think that can be effective. Like there's too many things.
Sorry if I jump in. That's what pulled me up. I went with suitable as well, and it was just that language difference in the ISMG. In that dot point it says mostly grammatically accurate, appropriate, whereas effective says grammatically accurate. Which to me implies that it has to be pretty consistent. And there is just
I think if you're pulling out like 3+ things,
mistakes.
that's when it has to.
And like pretty big ones too. It's not just a funny change in tense. It's like they've missed a word, they've added a word, there's a sentence that they didn't complete.
And that's what I had too. Sorry to jump in as well. That's what I had too. And now that I think about it, that's why I didn't put the first one in discerning, because I was like, this can't be discerning. Because this is suitable. Like,
I think that's because it's that whole idea. It's like
that can't be there, and
they can't be.
But is that more to do with the mode one? Because that's
I had it for mode. I had effective 1, effective 2, and then suitable for last one. And that's why I didn't have that first one up in discerning. But then I had this next one in effective, but I am now convinced that it would be suitable. So
it's really hard. Then do we knock the language choices back down to effective? No, I don't think. What do you think, Max? I feel like, sorry, you haven't said it.
No, that's right. I mean, obviously they haven't, like you said before, they definitely haven't reread this. I know that's a negative. I felt, it's hard to do this one without, I was looking for positives, but I was very much struggling. Like the opening sentence was really good.
yeah,
But it sort of just kept getting not worse, but and then but as you said, like it just picks up so quickly in the third one, like it's written really well, which is why I'm a bit confused as to why that is. But then sort of the last point as well, didn't really understand what was sort of being finished there. Like they just sort of, it felt like a quick roundup. Not much else was mentioned. It was just sort of saying like, like we should like totalitarian dystopian fiction. Like they sort of kept saying they never really hit a main point that they had discussed throughout it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where I sort of lost more marks, but I was really looking for it in the third sort of page, and I think that's where I was trying to find the marks, but I could only give it suitable.
Yes.
I think if you have like suitable for this one and then your mode, because your mode is on your punctuation, your spelling, and your overall like conventions, like that could be, because isn't it just those two that kind of like your language choices is different, but then she said like your spelling and punctuation and your grammar, they kind of have to like they couldn't so as long as those two are kind of one away from each other, because I still do think that it's suitable. Like I think there's too many.
I think there's too many to call it anything but suitable.
Okay.
And I mean, to be honest, I would feel comfortable moving discerning to effective.
Yeah, and we all had that.
We all
had that. So maybe we should go with our gut there. And
But I still do think, even if we had that one discerning, the next one would be suitable, regardless with the last one. Probably around the effective.
You can move that down, but I can't see it hitting effective for that point.
Yeah.
I just can't see it. It can hit suitable.
Yeah. And I think, and that's a point that we can make in the general feedback at the end, and like, what are you going to say to the parents and da-da-da. It's like the language they chose was good, but due to these other things, it like as a result of that, it brought the language down. And like that's
I don't know if we can do like I know. Yeah, Julie was saying they're not going to be too far apart in the thing, but I think from our judgment, if we're thinking they're using discerning language choices, that's what we should give them, and not be influenced by
what
the other one
place.
is.
I think we should go with our consensus. Even if we're like, could be a little bit wrong.
Because even if
I don't think we should knock them
and they're
down.
very different things, like language choice and then the language structure and grammar. Like, yes, that sentence didn't make a lot of sense, but the language that they used in the sentence was discerning. So I would
That's
agree.
why I think she meant like this one and the mode one are really closely. I don't think she meant too much on like the language choices, but these next two, like one can't be discerning, one can't be suitable because they're so closely.
Okay, so that's suitable.
Yes.
So does that mean the next one's suitable as well?
I have
Or
said that that
effective.
is.
I have effective, but
I have effective as well.
I had it as suitable when I was thinking earlier.
I didn't really know what it was.
See, because remember when we went round and each person was given a different objective. I had mode appropriate features, and the piece of evidence from the example was that they used the correct page number and reference, and they didn't do that. There's no reference to a page number.
It's just random quotes
At all.
pulled out of
Yes, no, I noted that as well. There's no page number. Sometimes I couldn't even tell which text they were referencing. Yes, exactly.
And
I didn't even pick up on that. There you go.
There was a few times, and like the random little like quotations in that first paragraph, the final sentence, autocracy is also on the two blah 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 through fascist military coup or a cultural revolution. What is cultural revolution is in direct quotations. Where is that coming from? I don't know. And they do that very often. There's some points where in that intertextuality part where they say freedom through work, we know what they're talking about because the whole paragraph is about children of men, but there is other things where it's like, I don't know what there
Yeah.
talking about, I don't know what they're referencing.
Especially when they chuck things like you were being watched at any given moment in quotations, and you're like, are you quoting something, or
Yes.
is that something that you
think.
said?
You said, have you found it in an article somewhere?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, yeah.
That's really essential, and they're missing that.
Yes, and that is
The only
the
the only other thing she said for mode is like the punctuation and the spelling.
yes,
That we need to consider.
and we've already said that.
Yeah, for the most part, spelling is pretty good.
Yes,
That's what I mean. That's why I think I had it effective, because you did say page numbers, but I like punctuation was
Punctuation was mid.
mid.
Something I've also noticed is that every time they've mentioned the title of Children of Men
Some-
of Night,
yeah, yeah.
some are italicized,
some aren't. Yeah,
There's inconsistencies with their capital letters as well.
yes,
Yeah.
Which we talked about.
Yes.
I'm happy to give it a suitable.
Yeah, I think this is more
yeah, I
suitable.
know.
There
So,
was
yeah.
just a couple of random.
And like sometimes the isms have a capital, and so, like there's one authoritarianism that has a capital,
Yeah.
but then like 2 paragraphs after it's not a capital.
that a
Then
four?
there's one where government has a capital as well,
Yeah.
and then it's just
Yeah, and the mode, because I had to find the mode is like the type of thing that it is. So it's an article, so article appropriate features.
Yeah.
So yeah, my big hung up was the page numbers. I'm like, okay, I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard because you look at it and it's like inconsistent language,
Yeah.
and I'm like, I would describe it as inconsistent,
Yeah.
but I obviously don't want to give them that credit.
Yeah, I think it's suitable.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
because
that's what I mean. Yeah, suitable.
the rest of it does, like,
Yeah.
you look at it and it's an article and it does well being an article, but it's too.
So we've given it a 17.
That's
Oh,
four then.
so for this, is it a 4?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it's the what's the best fit.
Or is it
Best fit.
because then we put it all the way up? Okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's the best.
Best fit.
Sorry, Gwen.
So what's that all up?
Okay,
17.
Sorry, can you just run through the numbers? I will take photos of it.
Yes, just
knowledge application there, that's fine.
yeah.
Okay, knowledge and application we
7
had,
for the first one.
Yep.
then 6.
6 for the next one, and
then
then 4 for the last one.
So that is, what is that? 17.
17. Haha. Nailed it.
Nailed it, Max.
It was not what I had marking wise. But
Yeah, that's
numbers
Say
the
nothing.
same. Numbers the same.
Yeah.
Alright,
Okay,
can I stop this now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm going to stop it. Oh, thank you.